I'm Phil Lantis, and I am here to talk about Work in Progress Wednesday as the writer or adapter of the next show that Eclipse Theater LA is going to be doing, which is called The Sandman, which is an adaptation of a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. I'm talking to you tonight just a few minutes before midnight. This is actually the time that I do most of my writing because the house is quiet, everyone's asleep, and there are no distractions. So I'll talk a little bit about my writing process, and then I'll talk specifically about The Sandman and how it came to be. I'm the worst kind of writer, which is I'm a procrastinator, and then I just write all at once. So I think about it for a really long time, and I think about characters and key plot points and setting, and then I just kind of like boof and get it all out at once. I've written 5 original plays and 4 adaptations. 3 of them were based on Greek plays, one of which was never produced, and the 4th being this one coming up this summer in July that's an adaptation of a Hans Christian Andersen story. So how do I approach writing? Really, writing is just like you learn in school when you have to do the who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? So that's what any kind of writing is, including playwriting. So how I approach it, and everyone approaches it differently, is I have to think about who the characters are and where they are. And then I start to think about those characters and like, what am I trying to say? Which kind of becomes the why. Why am I telling this story? And once I kind of figure out why I'm telling this story and I know the characters and the location, and then it just kind of evolves into what they're saying and how they're saying it. Really the key for me is I often start with a location. I often write plays that take place in one location specifically. I don't know why, it's just something I'm drawn to. I think that's kind of the nature of theater. I don't want to get into Aristotle's Poetics or anything, but it just makes sense. You have a location and you fill it with characters, and then you figure out why are they there, what are you trying to say, and that's becomes the plot or the story. So for example, Appaloosa, which is a play I wrote a few years ago, took place on a ranch, but in a house on a Appaloosa horse ranch in Colorado. So I knew the location, and I knew the characters that I wanted, and I knew that it was about like the impact of violence within families and how that impacts beyond just the person who is perpetrating the violence. So that was kind of the theme, and then of course the story evolved. And once again, like I described earlier, I thought about it for probably 2 years, maybe even 3, and kind of worked on stuff, and then it sat down at a computer and wrote it in about 48 hours, or over 48 hours with breaks in there. So that's kind of my process. Like I say, that is not what I recommend for others. It is not a good writing process. It's just how I've worked so far. So adaptation is a very different thing. So the 3 adaptations I've done of Greek works were one that I called The Blackbird, which was based on the show The Bacchae. The idea was that it would be Charlie Manson and his family, particularly the girls in his family, recreating the story at Spec Ranch. And so that was a fun one, interesting. The next one I did was an adaptation of Aristophanes' The Birds. It was pretty straightforward. The main thing there was echoing the bird characters with characters that exist in current time. So originally Aristophanes back in ancient Greece was making fun of the politics and the mores and the stereotypes of his day, and I tried to update it. The third one I did was Trojan Women, not the upcoming Real Housewives of Troy that my wife Nancy is doing, but a more traditional kind of take on it, but set after the end of the Civil War. So it was more drama instead of comedy. I adapted that, but it never ended up getting produced. We'll get to it someday. And that brings me to the Sandman. So this all started with a discussion with David Steers with the Santa Cruz Shakespeare Festival. And I was interested in, doing something a little different. And so we got to talking and came up with the idea of doing a children's show. So I started reading various fairy tales and folk tales. And I was thinking Eastern Europe for some reason. So I was reading a lot of Russian and kind of Eastern European, Polish, and that sort of thing. And they're fascinating, but very, very dark, and not probably what you'd want to put on for a family show. I've always been a fan of Hans Christian Andersen, so I picked up a book that we have in the house and stumbled upon the Sandman, which was not one I knew. And it has a very interesting approach, because instead of being like one story, it's actually the story of the Sandman, or the Keeper of Dreams, coming to a young boy over 7 nights. And so that format was interesting, and with a little tweaking, it was able to talk about what I wanted to talk about with the show, which is really kind of encompassing a life. And so in those 7 days, the dreams that are shown to Henry, the main character who's a young boy, really encompasses a life and kind of shows a life. So it's a small version of a larger story. I was able to write it in basically a day and a half. It was a little shorter than my previous work, so it didn't take the full 2 days. And it was being planned for summer of 2020 as part of the Shakespeare Festival. Needless to say, we had a reading that was during COVID times, because we were shut down, and the reading went very well, and it was, we'd learned some stuff, and Nancy had already made some changes. She's going to be directing it, and that's kind of my process too, is after I write something, I share it with Nancy, and she asks questions and often finds points that aren't working so well and suggests improvements or clarifications, adds elements. So really, we're collaborators in every sense, and it will continue to evolve. We're just now in the audition phase. Nancy was holding auditions actually tonight, and we'll start in the rehearsal phase next week. So during the rehearsal process, it will continue to grow and change and tweak, and the actors and Nancy as the director have free rein to do that. That's every writer is different, and I respect every writer's point of view, but I'm not necessarily somebody who's in love with the words that I've put on paper. It's more the intention and the goal of telling a story with these characters. We're really excited that it's heading into production and that we can share it coming up in July. It'll be running basically 3 weekends in July, primarily as matinees, and we thank very much David Steers and the Santa Cruz Shakespeare Festival for letting Eclipse Theater LA be a part of the process. I hope and encourage you to come out in July and see the show, and we'll be having Work in Progress Wednesdays between now and that show, as well as some Work in Progress Wednesdays on Real Housewives of Troy, which will be presented in September at the Main. As always, if you want more information, please go to eclipsetheaterla.org, and you can find out about our upcoming shows and all the stuff that we do, as well as visit our YouTube, which is Eclipse Theater LA on YouTube. And this and other videos will be there, so you can enjoy them. And I look forward to seeing you hopefully at the show in July. Thanks so much for spending some time with me, and have a great evening. Take care.